Hey, what is going on? So after this video, you are going to understand the requirements, the basic requirements for getting stripes on your white belt. And if you have a white belt and you want stripes and maybe a promotion has gone by and you haven't gotten the stripes that you want and think you deserve, I'm going to give you some reasons why you may not be getting stripes and exactly what to do about it.
And when you find your passion, it ignites you as a person. You just feel awesome.
I remember when I first started Jiu-Jitsu, it was about 3 months in, it was around promotion time, and I had multiple people come up to me and tell me this story. They were like, Crystal, all right, so-and-so was up for a promotion. They were going to get that promotion. So-and-so went up and directly asked the instructor, hey, am I gonna get promoted? And guess what happened? That person did not get promoted for months. All right. So this leads me to like two categories, right? The way to communicate with your coach and the way not to communicate with your coach. All right. And we're going to go over some do's and don'ts first of all, so that you could navigate this without being so-and-so. You know what I'm saying? Don't be like so-and-so. So communication rule number 1, right? Never, ever, ever, ever directly ask your coach, hey coach, so when am I getting my stripe? No, never, ever, ever do that. If you do that, you are going to be put on a list in your professor's mind, in your coach's mind, of most annoying students. And guess what? The list in his or her mind of most annoying students probably aren't going to get that extra tip on the mat and probably aren't going to be thought of to be promoted. So don't be annoying, right? Don't be annoying by directly asking your coach. Instead, so don't do that. What you can do, what's a good to do and a good communication pattern is to ask your coach, hey, what are some skills that you think are a good requirement for a first stripe white belt or second stripe white belt? What do you typically like to see in your students when in order for them to get promoted to the next level? Like, what are the skills, you know, in your eyes that you see are proficient for each level? Like, asking a question like that, not making it about yourself, making it about the curriculum, makes the question very objective, right? It makes the professor, it makes the coach want to describe his or her curriculum in a way that is like data driven instead of emotional based. So in that case, you're just asking a very objective question that can be answered without like uncomfortable feelings. And it's a very good question. Like, hey, like, what is a single stripe white belt? Like, what does that mean? What does that look like in terms of skills? Like, and you can even add something like a little funny thing, like, you know, I'm asking for a friend, but that is something that is very good to ask. And then you have the information that you need in order to decide where you're at in terms of those, you know, qualifications, right? Another thing that you can do is you can ask your coach, like, hey coach, you know, I've been trying to get better, you know, do you mind keeping an eye on me, like whenever you can, sometime this week, next week, whenever you can, and let me know, like, if you see anything that I could improve, just tell me. It's, you know, I'm open to that. It's really good to be coachable, right? And that leads me to another tip. All right, this is what not to do. If your coach or somebody who is an advanced belt, like a blue belt, not a blue belt, sorry, a brown belt or a black belt, and they see you rolling or they see you doing class and they give you a tip, accept the tip, say yes, and thank you, right? I have seen coaches complain multiple times about this. They'll be like, hey, so-and-so, you know, make sure you do this. And they'll look, the student will look at them, a white belt student will look at them and be like, well, I'm doing this because I'm thinking this and that, which is like, what are you doing? If you are a white belt, you know nothing. Like, you're not doing anything because of anything, because of what, a YouTube video? Like, don't explain why or try to defend why you're doing something or even justify it. No, just say yes and thank you for the tip. I've also seen people like give attitude back to a black belt giving a tip. And you know what? If you give attitude back to somebody who's trying to help you, do you think they're going to try to help you in the future? No. If they see something that you're doing, and it might even be a game changer, it might be that one little tweak, you know, when you're trying to do an armbar or your RNC, that's going to like really make the difference. Do you think they're going to take the time to like stop and tell you that after like that reaction? No, like that is that's the number one way that you're going to drive away anybody trying to help you. So it's definitely a skill to be coachable and to be able to take feedback and return a thank you and gratitude for that. So always being open to feedback, always just saying yes and thank you. If you have a question in regard, not a challenging question, not like, well, why do you know, like a question like, okay, well, what happens when I do this and what was I doing wrong before? Like, if you have a clarification question, yes, definitely ask it. But otherwise, yes, thank you. I will do that. I remember when I read the new mental toughness training for athletes, I'll put a link on it below. There was a cap, and the cap was a competitor athlete profile. So it was basically a list of adjectives that described you in reference to your sport, right? So it gave you a list of adjectives, and you take the test, and one of your teammates takes the test, and your coach takes the test, and they grade the test based off of what they perceive of you in the sport context that you're being tested on. And I remember when I got back my results from my coach, like I had a 3 out of 10, which was bad for being coachable. Like in the beginning, I was very uncoachable. And one of the reasons for that was because I was very like self-directed. So I was like trying to explain to him why I was doing like certain things to see if there was any rationale behind that. But he didn't want to hear that. Like he didn't want to hear my why of why I was doing something wrong. He just wanted me to be like, yes, thank you. So I definitely learned from that. So from like the school that I go to now, and like in my future interactions like with him and other upper belts, I was just like, yes, thank you. And I'm very, it's always good to be very open and welcoming of feedback, because it's very hard to see yourself, right? Because you're in your own body. Other people can see what you're doing, and it's much easier for them to offer little tidbits and tips that are going to help your game. So definitely getting the ego out and getting you know, any type of ego-based or like emotion out of it, and just being completely objective in any type of feedback that you do get is extremely helpful, especially when your upper belt teammates are giving you feedback, like your black belts and your brown belts and your coach. Like that's all super helpful. All right, let's move on to some basic requirements. This is very useful because at least you'll have an idea. You haven't asked your coach, or maybe you're too scared to ask your coach. The intention of Jiu-Jitsu is for self-defense. So in your first and second stripes, it is super important and useful, especially in real life circumstances, to understand the basics of self-defense in relation to Jiu-Jitsu. So there are some like very basic ground rules that support the things that you learn in Jiu-Jitsu. One of these key concepts is space and spatial distance. So for example, how do you keep too far or too close when you're standing? How do you keep too far or too close when you're on the ground? Why do we keep too far or too close? Like, what does that even mean, and why does that even help you in a self-defense situation? All right, so when you're too far or too close, you are basically controlling the distance. And when you are controlling the distance, you're controlling your opponent's ability to strike or to touch you or to transfer any type of force or energy through striking. So if you're, standing too far or too close, you are going to use your fighting stance and your footwork to maintain a distance where they cannot touch you or strike you, right? Too close, like for example, if you're on the ground, for instance, if somebody's in your guard, you are hugging them to you, that way they can't strike you. I mean, jiu-jitsu, you could have the best jiu-jitsu in the world, but in a self-defense situation, if you get knocked out, that's it. You're going in the van. Another thing that's like really useful to know as well when you're initially starting is a person's ability to control you and to control your torso while standing, and what I like to call like, you're not getting me in the van defense. So ask your coach about things like that. Like if you are in a body lock, how do you escape that? That way, you don't want that candy and you aren't getting in that van. Another really important key concept to know as a beginner white belt is the hierarchy of BJJ positions and what that means in terms of being able to control your opponent. So let's say I were to give you a bunch of BJJ positions, would you be able to sequentially order them from best to worst and tell me what parameters of control are being used in those positions? Would you be able to say like, okay, like having somebody's back is better than guard and this is why. Being, in somebody's guard is not as good as knee to belly and here's why. I have a whole video dedicated to that, so if you wanted to like learn about that, you can definitely go there. I'll tell you one story. I remember when I first started, I wanted to test my knowledge, and so what I did was I looked up a bunch of videos of home invasions, of women trying to get put in the van, of like basically security footage showing the initial contact between like the two humans, and what would I do in that situation based off of what I learned from my first jiu-jitsu classes. I'll even put a little clip here of a video that I watched of a home invasion, and I was surprised that I knew basic BJJ moves in order to combat this. Basically having a good open guard and using your feet to control the distance by putting your feet to your opponent's hip that's a way of controlling the distance. And it's just a beautiful thing to be able to like watch these videos and to be able to know that you would know what to do technically in a situation like that. Like it's what jiu-jitsu was intended to do, right? All right, so that is basically like the basic concept knowledge that forms the foundation of jiu-jitsu, like knowing the basic concepts of self-defense as it relates to jiu-jitsu. So first of all, like what's too far, too close, standing and on the ground, how do you implement that and why is that important? What is the positional hierarchy? Like why is that important, and what parameters of control do you have over your opponent for each position? Like that is super important. Moving on to rolling. So while you're rolling, right, coaches and professors want to see that you are like elevated from a day one white belt. And here are some ways and things to work on in order to have better skills, in order to for your coach to look at you and be like, they're getting promoted, they're getting their first stripes as a white belt. All right, so here are some things you can work on. First of all, as a white belt, typically, actually all the time, I've never seen a white belt not do this, they over grip everything, and it's a panic mode. So one thing that you can definitely work on is work on being comfortable in bad situations. Like if somebody has mounted you or is about to get a submission and you're in a bad position, are you completely spazzing and freaking out? Or are you breathing, calm, fluid, have the appropriate grip strength? Because this is why this is important. White belts typically are panicked, so they are not breathing correctly. They have shallow breathing, which just drains you, over gripping, which drains your energy, and the emotions are too much. It's like over gripping. Oh my god, I'm about to be submitted. Like it's this like constant panic feeling. So as a white belt, if you can get over that feeling and practice, I have a video of breathing techniques. Practice these breathing techniques. Practice being mindful of like, am I over gripping? Am I being panicked? Am I breathing? Practicing that type of fluidity will definitely help your game because you won't be wasting energy. You won't be over gripping and using all of your strength when it's not needed. And it's going to make the roll so much better, because if you are a white belt going against another white belt and you guys are just gripping each other and deadlocked and not even moving, how are you going to get better at jiu-jitsu? All you're doing is basically like, and nobody's moving. Like there needs to be movement, there needs to be fluidity in order to practice the movements of jiu-jitsu. If everybody is just afraid of losing and panicked, then nothing is going to happen. So as a white belt, I would definitely recommend not being afraid to lose and just relaxing a little bit and just seeing where the roll goes. And if you get submitted a bunch of times, that's okay. Sometimes I would just relax and go with it and just see where the person's taking me and see why it happened and try to like focus on what happened right before that or what keeps on happening right before that. So like, for example, what was happening with me recently is when somebody would get knee on belly and I would try to escape that, I would always get arm barred. And it was because, I would have this arm and I would try to be pushing, and that would create just a little bit of space in order for that arm bar to happen, instead of using the near side arm to cup the knee or to try to shimmy out. So it's like these little tiny things, like even though I thought my arm was close, just pushing allowed enough for that type of arm bar to happen to me. So if something is continuously happening to you over and over and over again, instead of, panicking in that moment, trying to relax and understand what happened those few seconds that led you to that happening is the way to go, instead of trying to like fight tooth and nail as it's happening to stop it from happening. Because if you just use all of your strength to stop it from happening as it's happening, that's not giving you any skill. If you are able to understand the first few seconds before it happened and understand why it happened, then you're able to prevent it with little to no energy if you apply the right technique to it, or if you know what you're doing that's giving your opponent the opening to do what they're doing to you. But yeah. So yes. As a white belt, getting your first or second stripes, in order to get there, I highly recommend being able to roll with fluidity, relaxation, breathing, which means not over gripping, no shallow breaths, and no fighting tooth and nail, like as hard as you can right when a submission is about to happen. Because at that point, unless you know a technical escape, it's already over. Just let it happen and try to figure out what led you to that moments before. That is gonna give you the skills that will help you at 3 and 4 stripes and beyond. So that being said, instructors have different schools, have different methodologies for how they test and how they give stripes and how they give belts, and even if they give belts. My first school tested for each and every stripe and gave stripes for their belts, and he had a curriculum, and each stripe had specific moves that you knew, and it was cumulative. So if you're at stripe 2, you needed to know stripe 1 to stripe 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, stripe 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you had a shark tank at every 4th stripe in order to get, the next belt. So it was very, very formal. At the gym that I go to now, they don't do stripes and they don't do formal testing. It is a observation of your coach seeing your skill level on the mat. So yeah, so you could be going to a school and see either or. And you know, so it's nice to be able to have stripes and to have that little carrot, but let me tell you one thing about belts and stripes and all of that. It is just a representation of your skill. Like if I were to give you a stripe, or if I were to give you a belt right now, like let's say you were day 2 or your first couple of months in, and I give you a blue belt, like what would it mean to you? What would be the feeling of receiving that? Like think about that feeling versus what if I were to give you a blue belt after you spent 2 years on the mat, 2 years of like trial and error and failure and success and blood and sweat and tears and like all that wonderful stuff and learning and growth, and 2 years of that, and then I give you the blue belt. Like how would that blue belt feel after that? It's like the meaning that is represented by the physical thing of the belt or the stripe. I mean, that's the thing that is important. Like what is important is the process behind the physical representation of that process. So like it's always good, you know, like it's always nice to have that carrot of either like a stripe or a belt, but like what's really important to focus on is to focus on each and every class or each and every time you're on the mat. What's one thing that I can work on? One small thing that I could work on that can make me be better? Like what's one small thing that keeps on happening to me when I roll that's really annoying that I could fix? Or like one move that I could just work on just a little bit more and just a little bit more until maybe just finally I can get it during a live roll. It's like those little tiny incremental growth steps, just small baby steps every time that you go in, that focus of like, okay, I'm going to get a little bit better at this. That is like, it feels so much better than worrying about a stripe or a belt, because then you can leave the mat feeling like satisfied and you're actually gonna grow because of it. Like all those little small things are gonna start to add up, instead of going to the mat being like, when am I gonna get that stripe? When am I gonna get that belt? Like I'm better than that, I'm better than so and so. Like that type of mindset sucks so bad. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So in a nutshell, if you are just starting jiu-jitsu, if you're trying to get your first stripes and you want to be promoted and you haven't been promoted yet, don't directly ask your professor to promote you, or when am I getting that stripe. Just ask them, what are the requirements for being promoted? And ask them, hey, if you see anything, please tell me like how please tell me if I'm doing something wrong, and don't be shy of correcting me, because that's what I'm here for. Like that's nice. And if you do happen to have the privilege of having a black belt or a brown belt, or your professor or coach tell you something that you need to improve on, thank them and just be like, yes, and do it. And then finally, the skills that are required to be a white belt are definitely like, think about the concepts of self-defense. So like too far, too close, distance management, how to not be taken into a van, how to not be knocked out, how to remain conscious, and then also what submissions would you use first? Like why is an RNC better than an arm bar? You know what I mean? Like I don't know about you, but if somebody were attacking me, I would rather have them be submitted and unconscious, because then that would be 100% guarantee of escaping versus just having a broken limb. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to go for an ankle lock, I'm not going to go for a knee bar, I am going to go for an RNC, and maybe like systematically then go to the extremities to make sure that, you know, that person's just immobile while I grab my phone. But knowing like the self-defense basics, that's the essence of jiu-jitsu. That's why it was created. And then finally, when you're rolling, working on being fluid and relaxed, and if you're in a bad position, just flowing with it and understanding what happened before in order to lead you there, versus spazzing out when the submission is happening, right? So that's about it. All right, until next time. Bye.
I think the girls girls with their nails done now.